The NBA playoffs are here. Let's get started with who to invest in. All right, everybody. NBA playoffs kick off tonight. And so what does that mean for the card market? We're going to go through and just kind of give an update and ideas as to, what we can expect and potential investments to throw some money into. Card market across the board's kind of depressed lately, particularly basketball. I think a lot of interest waned this season, and I think a lot of it may pick up as we enter the playoffs this year. As most of you probably already know, we have the play-in tournaments. So yeah, we'll start on the East and then work our way to the West. And number one seed 76ers. So obviously the big guys you're going to be looking at there are Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid. I think they're probably good investments, long term as well as short term, if they can make a run in the playoffs. So those are the two that I would really go after for the 76ers. Probably focusing on Ben Simmons if he can really do something there. Next up, the Nets. Durant and Harden, obviously going to be the two 800-pound gorillas on that team. I'm not really worried about the other players. Durant's always going to be a good buy, and I think Harden's always going to be a good buy. I think they're both great generational type players, and if the Nets can win the championship or at least get to the championship, it's going to be due in part, large part, to those two. So those two teams are going to be waiting for the play-in games to be played to figure out who they're going to be playing against. Next up, third, the Bucks. So Giannis is going to be the main guy there that everybody's focusing in on. I don't disagree. I think Giannis is going to be the go-to for the Bucks. If you're going to want to invest in one Bucks player, that's probably it. But also take a look at Chris Middleton. His rookie card is very low pop and pretty low cost too. I think he's a great player. He'd be a good person to go try to acquire and make some money, especially if he helps out that Bucks team to do well. So Chris Middleton will be another name to keep in mind along with Giannis. The Knicks, it's crazy. The fourth seed is the New York Knicks. That's true. That's a true statement. So, but yeah, they've been great this year. They've got Julius Randle, RJ Barrett, and Emmanuel Quickley are the three names that I would kind of focus in on for the current New York Knicks. I don't really think that I would be investing in any of them at this point, just because I think a lot of them are popular. I would wait till after the season. I don't expect them to make it out of the first round. They're playing the Hawks. I'd pick Atlanta to win that matchup. Even though Atlanta's the 5th seed, New York's the 4th seed, they both have the same record. I still just like Atlanta's roster a little bit better than the Knicks. I think they're built more for the playoffs, and that's just personal preference. The Knicks could very well go out and win. If they do, I think it's probably mainly due to Julius Randle. Next, I just talked about the Hawks. Trae Young would be my guy there. They have a lot of good players, but Trae Young's going to be the one that moves the needle for the Hawks. So if you're interested in that matchup, that's going to have a lot of eyes on it because of the New York market and then of the Trae Young interest. I would be all about some Trae Young. His prices dipped way down for over the past 6 to 9 months. So I would definitely invest in Trae Young if you agree and you think the Hawks are going to do well. Worst case scenario, you hold them till next season starts, and then you offload him there, or you can hold him long term. I think Trae Young's a bright young talent and he can do well. 6th seed, the Heat. So the Heat are going to play the Bucks in the first round. The Heat had the huge run last year in the bubble. They played the Bucks last year, beat them, but that was neutral site games in Orlando in the bubble. This is going to be true home court advantage for the Bucks. I think they have a pretty good home court advantage, and they have a great team. There's a reason they're the 3 seed and the Heat are the 6th seed. If the Heat can gel together like they did last year, they have a chance to upset the Bucks. I don't know if they will. I like the Heat. I'm not specifically a Heat fan, but I do like Tyler Hero. If you've followed me for any amount of time, you know I've invested heavily into Tyler Hero. I've offloaded most of those and made a good bit of money. Still have some optics and a prism or two, and then a couple other cards, so it's not like I'm hugely invested in Hero, but I do want to see him do well. I would like to see his cards bounce back. Right now they're so depressed in value that you can get them for next to nothing. Jimmy Butler would be another one. Obviously the Heat kind of go as Jimmy Butler goes. He's going to be the main star there. Tyler Hero's cards are so cheap that you know, he's been injured most of the year. Sorry about the siren, but I would definitely look into picking up some Hero. And like I said, cards on the table, I have some Tyler Hero cards, so take that for what it's will. He's averaging 15 points per game, 5 rebounds, and 3.5 assists. I think that comes up during the playoffs, assuming he's back 100% healthy. He's kind of taken a step back in his role, but I think as the playoffs go, if he starts getting hot and taking some shots and doing well, he could really see. He's one of those guys that gets a ton of social media following, a ton of social media fire, that if he has a couple of good games or one like gigantic game, his prices could just you know, go up crazy, over 100% over. I wouldn't be spending a ton of money on Heat players, and for that reason I'm probably out on the Butler market, but you can get some Heroes for pretty cheap right before the playoffs start, and maybe make a play there. Next up, the Celtics. Really only one guy to talk about here. For me, it's going to be Jason Tatum. You know, with Jaylen Brown out due to the injury, recovering from the surgery and all that stuff, it's really Tatum, and that's about it. Now, Boston does have Washington in the first round. Initially, I assumed, you know, Boston's probably going to run away with that game. I don't know. The more I think about it, the more I kind of like Washington in that game. Now, Boston's the 7th seed, Washington the 8th seed. I think, you know, 36, they're exactly 500. Boston is. Washington finished 34-38, just below 500. But Washington does have some really good players. Bradley Beal is battling back from injury, and then they have Russell Westbrook, which definitely a generational talent. He's great. He's really helped that Wizards team, and in a one-game play-in scenario where if you win, you're the 7th seed, I'm gonna bet on Russell Westbrook just taking over the game. And I think that's the kind of stuff that investors kind of look to. So I would be all about Russell Westbrook. And I'd be kind of down on the Celtics, really. If you want to invest in Tatum, just know that you may be investing for the losers bracket, whoever would play the winner of the 9-10
game, and you know that's a winner go home type of scenario.
So if that were the situation, I would look into it. Since that's the situation, it's so kind of crapshooty that I would probably steer clear of the Celtics in general, unless, like I kind of mentioned, you're looking long term for Tatum. I think he's a young star, and I think he's going to be good for years to come. So it's not the end of the world if they get bounced. But I'm just not putting a lot of stock in the Celtics, so I would go with Russell Westbrook. But just know too that the reward you get for beating Boston, if the Washington Wizards do beat Boston, is you get matched up with Brooklyn in the first round. So probably not going super far, even if they do win, and let's say they lose and then win over the 9-10 winner, they get matched up with the number 1 seed Philly. So kind of hard to get too jacked up about either of those teams. Next up, we have the Pacers versus the Hornets. That's the 9-10 matchup playing game. The Hornets made it into that 10th seed, got the playoff bid. They play the Pacers. If I'm going to invest in the Pacers, I'll be honest with you too, I don't know a ton about the Pacers. Karis LeVert would probably be the guy that I'm looking at. 40% three-point percentage in the last 10 games. Malcolm Bogdan is another interesting play. He's shooting over 38 three-point percentage, and he is questionable coming into the game, but if he plays, there's a chance that he's going to be matched up against LaMelo, and that could be, you know, the recipe for some good plays if he stops LaMelo or burns LaMelo, or, you know, puts one, you know, shoots a three in LaMelo's face, or dunks on him, or anything like that. You know, when you're matched up with a popular star, you have those chances for that kind of viral moment. So that's kind of why I would be potentially looking at Malcolm Bogdan. But the Hornets are so good; they're deep, and you know, I would look at you know, those two for the Pacers, and the Hornets, maybe Terry Rozier. I'm just not sure about the Hornets. I like PJ Washington, I like Miles Bridges, but I don't know that I'm investing in either one of them. LaMelo Ball is super popular, so if you could get some of his cards for cheap, I would probably recommend Melo. But in reality, I'd probably stay away from that team until the off season, and hope they kind of go down a little bit more. Over to the West, we have the 1 seed, the Jazz. Utah Jazz, 52-20 was their record, just edging out the Phoenix Suns at 51-21. Jazz, it's all about Donovan Mitchell to me. He'll be back and ready for action. Should be for the first round of the playoffs, and they'll get you know, presumably the worst team from the play-in tournament, round robin type of thing, but that could very well end up being either the Lakers or the Warriors, which isn't exactly what you want, but that is what it is. So you could also end up with Memphis or the Spurs if they get beyond that second play-in game. So yeah, Donovan Mitchell is kind of my guy there. I do have a Donovan Mitchell optic card that I just got graded with HGA. So again, just kind of not trying to hide anything. There's a reason why I bought Donovan Mitchell. I was getting ready for the playoffs. I thought the Jazz were going to be the number 1 seed, and I thought Mitchell was going to be leading them to the playoffs and into the playoffs through the playoffs. So Donovan Mitchell, again, I think that's probably the number 1 play there for the Jazz. For the Suns, it's a little bit more questionable. There's a lot of guys you could kind of go to. Cameron Johnson and Ayton are a couple of guys I have some cards of, and that's probably who I would go after if I were to pick any of the Suns. I think they're a good team.
Hey guys, just wanted to jump in here. I was editing and realized I don't mention Devin Booker at all here. His prices are just a little too high for me. He's a stud. He's the best player on the Suns, and he'd be a great investment if you have the capital to do it. I just didn't include him in this.
I like Cameron Johnson probably the best, just because Ayton's a big and usually don't command a ton of value and a ton of increase in prices, despite being, you know, the former number 1 and everything. So I'd probably lean Cameron Johnson. Next up, the Nuggets. The Nuggets are going to play the Portland Trailblazers, and you know, that's a tough pull for Denver. I like the Trailblazers. Damian Lillard is a stud, but Denver definitely has the players to keep up with them and beat them. With Murray out, I would probably be focusing all my efforts on MPJ. Michael Porter Jr. is the guy for that Denver Nuggets team. He's really carried the water, especially since Murray's gone out. He's great as long as he stays healthy. He's going to continue to rise in popularity. So even outside of the 2021 playoffs, I'm good with MPJ and holding his cards longer term. So yeah, for that Nuggets team, if you're looking at somebody, it's MPJ. Their opponent, the Portland Trailblazers, to me it's Dame. It's Dame time and nobody else. I'm looking at Damian Lillard. I know his prices are expensive. That's who I'd go with. I think he's going to be, a top talent in this kind of generation of players, and he is the face of that Portland franchise. Doesn't sound like he's going anywhere anytime soon. He signed that long extension. He's been very adamant that he's not leaving Portland, so take him at his word for it. That's not great for card prices. I'd rather him be in a bigger market, but he's not. So he has plenty of viral moments on his own though, so that's who I would invest in if I were going after a Blazer. Next up, the Mavs face off against the Los Angeles Clippers that were accused kind of playing with their seeding and tanking a little bit towards the end, so they get that 4th seed, not the 3rd seed. So they matched up against Dallas instead of Portland, and also that they would potentially stay away from the Lakers as long as possible. We'll see how that all shakes out, if it shakes out, in the future. But right now, if I'm going after a Clipper, it's going to be Kawhi. I think he's great, but he's just so not loud and not in a ton of places. So kind of hard just being that soft-spoken great player, but just not the guy that's everywhere on every billboard, on every commercial, etc. It's tough to invest in that guy just because you almost forget about him. You forgot about him being in Toronto. Now he's in LA, but it's still kind of like the little stepbrother to the Lakers. They just don't get the press, even though they're the 4th seed. The Lakers are the 7th seed. Anyway, so that's kind of what I'm looking at there. The Mavs, again, it's kind of like Trae Young with the Hawks. It's the Mavs, it's Luka. Luka's the stud there. He's going to have the viral moments. If he can go off a couple of games, his prices are going to shoot back up. His prices are kind of down. They've been going back and forth a little bit, varying up and down throughout the year. But I would, just lock in a relatively low price if you can on a Luka and go for it, because that guy's he's a stud. He'll be a stud for a long time. He's young. He's the leader of that Dallas team, and if they do anything, again, it's because of Luka. So on to the play-in games. The Lakers play the Golden State Warriors. If they win, whoever wins that game will get the 7th seed and get the Phoenix Suns. And so you have a LeBron versus Curry as kind of the big, huge matchup. That's a tough one. It'll be a very interesting game. A lot of people are going to be paying attention to that one. I think the NBA couldn't have drawn that one up any better as far as ratings and everything else goes. Although I'm sure they want both of those teams long term in the playoffs. I mentioned them, LeBron, Curry. Those are the kind of guys that I'm looking at there. LeBron is LeBron. He's probably the best or second best player ever. So it is what it is. I'm not the biggest fan of the guy, but it's impossible to ignore his talent. So, yeah, his prices have kind of dipped a little bit too. It'd be a good time to buy in on LeBron. There's also Space Jam coming out this summer, and it's LeBron. So, there you go. Curry has had just a meteoric year where he's just playing out of his mind, even for his standard. I really like Curry too, so that kind of helps. And his prices dropped down. They've come back a little bit, but they're still low compared to their all-time high back last year. So I would go after Curry now, because if they beat the Lakers and if they make any moves through the playoffs, they're really going to go high. And then next year, Klay should be coming back. The Warriors should be back in action. I would be all about some Curry cards. If you had some disposable income and you needed somewhere to stash it, that's where I'd stash it. So last but not least, Grizzlies Spurs in the 9-10 play-in game. The winner will take on the loser of the Lakers Warriors game and try to vie for that number 8 seed against Utah. If I'm looking at Grizzlies, I'm really probably just looking at John Morant. he's going to be the guy that I'm paying closest attention to. He's going to get the most publicity, and yeah, that's who I would go after if I were going after a Grizzly. Plenty of young talent on that squad though, so if you prefer Triple J or somebody else, by all means go for it. Again, I just recommend everybody do their own homework. These are just kind of my thoughts. And the Spurs, it was interesting to look into. You know, I'm not totally sold on the Spurs, period, but if I had to pick a guy, it would be DeMar DeRozan, and I think he's going to be a top guy for that team. Plus, he's got some kind of mental health docuseries coming out later this year, and so that may or may not be super popular, may or may not garner a lot of attention. And even if it doesn't, you know, he's still DeMar DeRozan. And on top of that, he's an unrestricted free agent for this year, so he could sign back with the Spurs, which would be fine. But the Spurs kind of a smaller market, not a huge team with a huge following. So if he could go to a bigger team, a bigger market, anything like that, to get his name out there and really rise his card prices, you know, he might just well do that in the off season. So even if they get bounced, DeRozan might be a good play there. And that's going to do it. Those are your 20 NBA teams that are in the playoffs, including the play-in tournament. But that's just kind of my thoughts on the 2021 NBA playoffs. Let me know what you think below. Smash that like button and drop some comments. Subscribe if you're not already. I appreciate y'all checking it out. Also, these are all just kind of my thoughts. I for sure don't know anything that you can't figure out as well. I would suggest everybody do their own homework. Make sure to research before you buy. And have